Okay, now we're going to move into a little bit of how to study. As you look at the course objectives in your textbook, I really urge you to use your textbook to its fullest potential, that you will learn to write in your textbook and highlight. We're going to talk about highlighting here in a little bit, but as you go through these course objectives, um, there's three things you need to be writing down near these. Just through your experience as adults, there are some things you may know before you come into this EMT class. Maybe you've been to a prior EMT class. Maybe you've been an EMT before. Maybe you've been an EMR. Maybe you've been in the military and learned some of these things. So there are going to be some things that you are going to know. So when you look at an objective, and test questions are taken from objectives. So it's very important that you go through each of the objectives that you're given, and that you go through and understand what how they apply and what those objectives are. So as you're looking down through your objectives, if you look at an objective and you say, "Oh, I know that. I know that I know that. I've learned that somewhere else, or I've learned that through some sort of experience that I've had, and I know that so well, I don't have to learn that again." You can put a plus by that objective. That simply means that you probably don't have to go back and study that objective anymore. If you look at an objective and you say, "Well, I think I know it, but I'm not sure." Maybe there's something there, maybe you've seen it or experienced that objective before, that thing before, and you think you may know it, but you're just really not sure. You put a minus by that, and then those are things that you know you need to go look at. And then when you look at it, you say, "Oh yeah, I remember that. I know that I've got that now. I understand what that means, and I've got that." You can turn that minus into a plus, and those are things you know that you know. And then there's going to be those objectives that you've had no experience with before in the past, so you have no idea. Maybe you've never heard of it, you've never experienced it, you just don't have a clue about whatever it's talking about. So you put a 0 there. Those are things that you know that you need to hit really hard, that you need to really study on, or maybe look up additional information from another source besides your textbook. So if you put a 0 by that, you'll know that you need to work on that more. So as you work through each chapter and work through your objectives, it's a good idea to put pluses, minuses, and zeros next to each objective, depending on how you feel about it and what you know about it. It's also important to get to know how your textbook is formatted. Many people don't look at what's in the very front of the first few pages of the book or the very back of the book. And this is a mistake, because there's a lot of good information as far as how your textbook is organized. So this is very important. You need to read the title pages. Look to see how things are organized. Look at subheadings and headings and that sort of thing. Read the preface. This gives an idea of where the author is coming from, so that you'll know maybe is this textbook a new textbook? Is it an updated textbook? Where did the textbook come from to begin with? So a lot of this will be in the preface. Look at your table of contents, so that if you need to look up information, you can find it quickly. This will save you study time, and will save you time when you're trying to find those things. Our textbook, for example, has an abbreviated table of contents, and then it has an expanded table of contents. So depending on, if you're trying to find a very specific subject, you want to look at the expanded table of contents. But if you're just trying to find what chapter is trauma in, for example, you can look in the abbreviated table of contents and be able to find that a lot quicker. Look at the index, the glossary, and other material in the back of the book. There's lots of information in the back of the book. The index is going to be how you can find certain things as well. If you're looking for how to take a blood pressure, for example, you'll be able to find that in the index. The glossary will give you definitions of words, so that's very important as well. That you understand, as you're reading, if you run across a word you don't know, look in the glossary. It likely will define that. If not, you can look it up. Look it up in a dictionary. Look it up online. I do recommend for people who are looking at EMS as a profession that you get yourself a medical dictionary. There are some good ones online. Some are free, some are paid, and there's also still good medical dictionaries in print form out there as well. Look at study questions that might be at the back of the chapters or the back of the book. Other guides and other helps. These are meant to improve your study, to do some of that retrieval practice that I mentioned earlier, maybe to test you or quiz you, as well as a variety of guides that might be there as well. One of the things that I do suggest, the workbook was not required as part of your course. I made that decision. However, if you, I do recommend for, especially if you're brand new to this, that workbook may be very helpful to you. So you may want to look at possibly purchasing that. You want to look at chapter headings, sectional headings, and margin guides to see how they're organized so that you can find things quickly, but also that you can review things very quickly as well. Lots of times in the margin guides, they may give definitions to words. They may explain a concept, may explain some sort of process. So those are always really good to look at. Look at the pictures, the charts, the diagrams, and the tables. These aren't just put in there to waste space. These are put in there to help you understand the concepts that that particular chapter is talking about. And especially for visual people, it's important to look at these various charts and diagrams because it will sometimes put into graphic form something that the chapter is saying, so it may help you understand it. So we want to make sure we learn by listening when we're studying. So learning by listening, we determine why the material is important. Not everything that a speaker says, not everything in a textbook is vitally important. But it is important to understand that you need to be able to pick out the main ideas with someone who is teaching. Be able to pick out those main ideas that they're talking about so that you can make good notes with. Avoid sitting near distractions. This is both in class and at home or wherever it is you study. Try to avoid distractions. If, for example, some people think they can study while watching TV or while listening to music and singing along with it, or maybe while if you have young children, the young children are running around playing. These are all distractions and they don't help your learning. So you need to find a good environment for you and get away from some of these distractions. You want to listen to what the speaker is saying, and again, listen for understanding. Try to figure out the main ideas and the main point of what the speaker is trying to tell you. Look at the speaker's pattern of organization. Most speakers or instructors or faculty members will teach from an outline. So a lot of times the material that is presented to you is in outline format just through the spoken word. Again, look for those main ideas of what the speaker is trying to tell you. Don't let your mind wander. It's important to pay attention. We have typically a short attention span. Some people have shorter attention spans than others. Social media hasn't helped that as well. But we want to make sure that, if our mind is wandering, we're not listening to the speaker. So it's also important to stay away from social media while you're trying to study. Take notes while you listen. We'll talk more about notes here in just a little bit. So when you're studying, it's important to be able to concentrate. You want to create a study or work environment that is good for you. Not everybody needs the same environment. Again, you want to control those distractions, making sure that things with the family aren't distracting you. You want to figure out when to study. Daytime and early evening for most people is typically the best time. Late at night, real early in the mornings, like midnight and 2 a.m., that sort of thing, typically are not good times to study. There are those people that, because of their work schedule, their bodies have adjusted to a nighttime schedule, and but use whatever your daytime and your early evening time with that. Set very specific study goals. Learn to reward yourself when study goals are met. So those study goals need to be measurable and achievable. But then do something that will reward you when those are met. Plan the length of study period by the amount of material you need to cover, not by a clock. So don't sit down and say, I'm going to study for an hour. You may get done in less time than that. You may also need more time. But if you have a lot of study to do, you're going to need to break that up into shorter periods to be able to have short little breaks to refresh yourself. You want to reduce any competing activities. Again, this goes along with distractions, but when there are, it's important to schedule things out. If you have family obligations, make sure you do include time for those family obligations, but then also make sure you plan time for your study as well. You want to take short breaks at least every hour. It's very important. Most of us cannot sit and study for much more than 45 minutes to an hour without our mind wandering or getting tired or whatever. So just plan this into your study time. Take short breaks about every 45 minutes to an hour. Stop when you're tired or fatigued or your lack of attention occurs. Trying to fight through fatigue, if you're falling asleep, if your attention is going to other things, you may just need to take a break. You may need to just put things away for the evening or for the day. Come back to it some other time. One of the things that is very important is to avoid cramming. Cramming is reading large amounts of material very quickly because you have a test the next day, for example. And all that tends to do is help you memorize for a short period of time, but you don't have long-term learning taking place. So the goal of this is not that you just pass the test, but that you learn the material as well. Original learning must take place at some point in time, and you can't have original learning taking place when you're cramming. You also want to look at how new learning relates to previous learning. Adults learn things by relating new material to older material or older experiences. So that's important. How does what I'm learning now relate to what I already know? I mentioned earlier retrieval practice. This is vitally important with current research in brain-based learning. It's very important that you practice with testing, with quizzing. This can be done. It doesn't have to be written. It can be online. It can be 2 or 3 people sitting down together, quizzing each other, talking about concepts, for example. It's important after you read something for the first time that you give it a break for a short time and then go back to it. So about every 24 to 48 hours, you want to review that new learning, review what you've learned. Reviewing is not new learning. Reviewing is similar to retrieval practice in that you're exercising that brain, but you're not rereading everything totally. You're reviewing concepts, you're reviewing your notes, for example. Review in short bursts of 20 to 30 minutes and then take a break. Again, that's important for those various connections, both chemical and physical connections in the brain to connect the various memories that you are using.